my own time. You're all very welcome to the Redbox Studio. Music broadcast live on the internet. First, I believe, from the Queen's Quarter in Belfast, according to Dónal, new name. First live broadcast from the studio, and the first live broadcast from a book launch. Book launches used to be a pleasure listening to Terry. Of organisation Silence. It's interactive. Those of you who are watching on the web, there's a little red button to the right hand side of your screen, and you can press that. You can write in comments and ask awkward questions if any of you have the book. First of all, for those of you present, the housekeeping rules. You put off your phone to just check that they're off, maybe airplane mode or whatever you do. Exits, if you find the proceedings unbearable, you suddenly want to run out, or they have the music too awful, you want to leave, out there at the back or out this way here. Toilets, equally, if the music affects you badly, you can go upstairs or out the back here. And the final thing is, at the interval, there will be a short interval in the middle after about 3/4 of an hour. Don't leave, especially the people on the web. Hang around, send in your comments, and you'll find that it takes off again with more music and you get more interviews, etc. And it's a good pleasure for me to be launching this book, Traditional Music in Irish Society, Historical Perspectives. It's a 350-page book, beautifully written, Martin, and it just flows. It's very easy to read. I thought myself, and I thought, if you tell Martin confesses in the introduction to this book that he's an historian, and that his last book was history, and he's really an historian, not a musical commentator. But it's very interesting because it's like telling somebody who applies for a job at an old people's home that my last job was working with euthanasia. Musicians normally they run away from anything to do with serious literature, but this. I think this illuminates an awful lot of stuff that we handle all the time through myth, and we hear rumours about things, and there's all these wonderful stories going around, but Martin has debunked all the wonderful stories and he's condensed it all into this book. It's divided into sections. It's not a document on Irish music, traditional music at the present time, really. It's aspects of it, and it's aspects that maybe haven't been covered in other places. That's what's good about it. There's a wonderful introductory chapter, a huge chunk on the early period, what he calls the 18th century inheritance, which is wonderful because I should say there's nothing in it I haven't read before except one thing, which I'll talk about. But the thing is, you have to get about 25 different books to find all the information that he has here. It's all in one chapter, beautifully put together in a kind of chronological order, plus mention of the various publications in traditional music, we now call traditional music. There's lots of quirky quotes, not least one which Martin probably deal with, a woman who was mad and dancing in the 18th century, just dance, set dance, quadrilles all the time. There's also a quote from Davy and from Krishnamurti. There's everything in here. There's all sorts of strange philosophies going on, alongside quotes from Daniel Corkery. So we have like the past and the present mixed together, but interpreting what was going on in the 18th century, the last 1700s. Another thing which he deals with very well is the foundations of what we call traditional music today. It wasn't always called traditional music. The term only emerges sometime at the end of the 1800s, and before that it was just music, or popular music, whatever you want to call it. The influential books of the period are dipped into, analysed where appropriate. A lot of new insights are given by Martin in the course. One of them is, which is maybe one of the quotes which has affected an awful lot of people in traditional music in the present time, is the one from Douglas Hyde, De-Anglicising Ireland, which curiously maybe acted as a spur to people to take up traditional music. Hyde says, this is in 1892, our music has become anglicised to an alarming extent. Not only has the national instrument, the harp, become extinct, but even the Irish pipes are threatened with the same fate. In the place of pipers and fiddlers, who even 20 years ago were comparatively common, we are now in many places menaced by the German band and the barrel organ. I think he meant the concertina. For the present, then, I must hope that the revival of our Irish music must go hand in hand with the revival of Irish ideas and Celtic modes of thought which our society is seeking to bring about, and that people may be brought to love the purity of Shul Rún or the Fodon Morin Rua in preference to get your hair cut or over the garden wall. If you knew anything about music at that time, he would know that there was also a traditional tune called Comb Your Hair and Curl It at that time, and also another one called Not Over the Garden Wall but Behind the Haystack. So a lot of the same concepts which are going on in popular music were really being voiced in the titles of traditional music tunes. But anyway, not to I could say like we're in a new world of music, and the very fact that a book like this can appear is one of a series of books which have appeared over the last, let's say, 15, 20 years. But like the old days, here we are outside, like there were really almost nothing about Irish music after 1923 until Bannock's book in 1963. Like 40 years, there was practically nothing. Anybody who wanted to learn music had to find collections in libraries or had to get materials from elsewhere. The other thing you might look around, here we are drinking water out of bottles. I mean, bottled water was unheard of when we were all beginning to play music, and yourself included, Martin, in the 1960s. And wine was something that only priests drank. Now we have no priests left. I think of the great moments, the great highs of music, the Rushing Do and Gurchin. Nowhere could be further removed from the Rushing Do and Gurchin, especially on a rainy day, than where we are at the present time. Like things have changed. There may be great spots for music, Dónal Hayden's pub in the Rock in Pomeroy, or O'Toole's pub at Ballymacnabb in Armagh. So everything is, the locations of music, contexts have all changed. In particular, we have state structures in music. We kind of dreamt about them or fantasized about them in the 1960s. And people like Sean Reid down in Clare, from down in Clare, fought to get teaching music established in vocational schools. We take this for granted now that music is there and the curriculum is there as an option in secondary school education. We take the Arts Council as a state structure for granted. The Arts Council has been around for a relatively short space of time. There also were dream jobs, and this gets me back to Martin Dowling. I mean, Martin is one of the dream jobs. I mean, teaching traditional music academically and performance in a university. I mean, these are things we just dreamt about, and we kind of joked about them back in the 60s and even in the 70s. And yet, all the major universities now teach traditional music. There still is a bit of a battle there about the status of the music in society. But anyway, just to wind up here, it just falls to me maybe to say that it's a very appropriate day for some reason, which Martin will explain himself. He has James Joyce on the front cover, not exactly a household name in traditional music, but he will explain all this himself. So appropriately, I take my cue. 16th of June is Bloomsday. I'm wearing my hat, and I'll declare this book officially launched. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The game plan is to kind of dwell with the book, and I'm going to read some bits out of it, if that's okay. It's a warm night, and we'll have plenty of breaks. But also to have some friends and colleagues play music that relates to the various chapters. But could I start by thanking a few people? First of all, it was important to me to have Jason O'Rourke and Conor Caldwell play tunes to get us going, because it's great to have your musical pals be also your intellectual collaborators. And I would like to thank Conor Caldwell for doing a really great job with the formatting of all the musical examples in the book. He's a master of a program called Sibelius. I haven't a clue, and I'm greatly in his debt. Jason O'Rourke spends a lot of time doing a lot of different types of editorial work, and this is the cleanest bibliography you will find, and that's down to Jason. So thanks to Jason. I'll thank some other people later on, but really there are two other people that I'd like to thank live over the waves of YouTube this evening, because I wouldn't have been able to get started on this project in 2005 had it not been for a sociologist in University College Dublin named Tom Inglis, who hired me as a postdoctoral student and allowed me to take a career break from the Arts Council and dip my toe back into academic work. And I'm very grateful to Tom. He was a great colleague for 3 or 4 years that I worked in UCD. And I wouldn't have been able to take up that job without the enormous generosity of the late Barry Raftery, professor of archaeology in UCD, and his wife, Nuala Raftery, who opened their home to me and allowed me to stay in Dublin whilst my two lads were still in school, and Christine, and we were all based here in Belfast. It simply wouldn't have been possible. So I'm happy to say thank you to both Tom and to Nuala. So about the book, while writing the book, I have been involved in a couple of what Brian Eno calls oblique strategies, circuitous routes, difficult routes towards achieving a goal that you might like to achieve. One oblique strategist that Una Monaghan, who will be a guest in the second half, and I have been collaborating with is John, or through, is a man named John Cage, who invented a way to realize literary works, and we had traditional music and literary realization of a book called The Star Factory by Kieran Carson. And with Una and Ryan Malloy, we've been operating in chance-determined scenarios to play traditional music in a kind of randomly provoked improvisational form. But the kind of master oblique strategy that is another reason why I'm here and why this book exists is that I decided after finishing university that I didn't want to be a lawyer and I didn't want to be a banker, that I wanted to play the fiddle. And I wanted to do so in Ireland. And the oblique strategy for that was to do a PhD in Irish history. It seems to have worked. But the book that has come out of all of this, it has kind of an accidental structure, and that's to do with this accidental career of mine, which started in Irish social history and then drifted into arts, into the arts sector in Northern Ireland, and back into sociology and literary study as well. And finally, I'm now a musicologist, which is amazing to me. So that the book originally was to be a mashup of some of these types of ways of looking at the world. Some sociology, a chapter on the sociology of the session, some aesthetic reflection on traditional music, and a couple of political chapters about the 1890s, the movement that was sparked by the Douglas Hyde quote that Fintan set off with there, as well as the 1990s. But when I was writing that chapter, which is chapter 3 here, I had kind of a crisis because I needed to write a historical context for that chapter, and I tried to do that in an introduction, but failed. And while I was off in the west of Ireland in a cabin on my own just for a week, I rang a few people up, some of you are here, to say, should I really do this? It's going to take me it's going to put me back a year. So I decided to write these 2 historical chapters because I felt like they needed to be written. And they're not based on primary research of mine, but I just felt like I needed to gather what we know together and see what can be said. And so there you go. So we're going to have a look at these first 2 chapters here in the first half, and Eilis is going to help me out, and Robbie's going to help me out, and to unpack some of the ideas. And as I went along, it seems the early reviews are coming in. One reader here, Lilith O'Leary, last week has read it. It seems that there might be some things that provoke people. The first of these has to do with when the story of Irish traditional music starts. My understanding of the 17th century, a century of conflict, of rupture, and of economic stagnation, leads me to question conceptions of timeless continuity of traditional music, continuity into the ancient past. What do we know about Irish music, after all, before the 18th century? It's a peculiarity of the long historical encounter of foreigners with Ireland that, however barbaric the Irish appeared, their music was always admired for its beauty and intricacy, and their musicians for their skill and dexterity. Yeah, there we go, there's a quote. We all start with this quote from Gerald of Wales. And there are numerous observations from previous centuries, like this one, of the peculiarly high musicality of an otherwise barbarous race, beginning with Cambrensis. Now it's running on its own. Okay, there's the Wild Geese. That's coming up. It's away. I can't stop it. Paddy Keneally. That's Robbie. Okay. Put it back on pause. Yeah. I should probably. Here, you hold that. Point it at that and see. And the decline of the pipers. Well, we just watched the slideshow. But, okay. What's the point? All of this commentary tells us next to nothing about what Irish music sounded like in the Gaelic epoch. For example, the celebrated stylistic trio of gantry, goltry, and suantry, each style inducing in the listener joy, mournfulness, and trance, respectively, has, as far as can be seen, no basis in the evidence of actual performance or repertoire. This is a stylistic trilogy of musical feats based entirely in the myths and stories that survive in textual form in modern times, with the compositional imagination required for the performance of these feats restricted to beings of another world to which some harpers might have access. And I have access to this analysis, and I'll give a shout out to a former MA student of mine, Shannon Kennedy. I said, go and find out about these three feats and tell me what's going on, and she did so. And thanks, Shannon. Hope you're watching. Actual performers of the harp were as likely to have accompanied the recitation of these myths as they were to have achieved the feats themselves. The magical stylistic powers were often attributed to the harps themselves or the magical properties of their strings rather than their players. And finally, it's not apparent, even at the level of myth, that music in the gantry style was associated with dancing. So what we do know is that some musicians were exalted and held positions of power within society. They were historians, they were propagandists, mediators, educators, as well as entertainers. And we know that because they attracted the attention of the political and military enemies of the Gaelic aristocracy. And with the incorporation of Ireland into an archipelago of kingdoms under the English monarchy, the position of the harper gradually evolved, in historian Alan Fletcher's words, from a dangerous inciter to Gaelic sedition to a domesticated cultural trophy. While the cultural surrounding it was destroyed and its players scattered across Europe, the harp itself was paradoxically transformed into a symbol of monarchical rule, of the incorporation of the Irish polity into a large kingdom-wide structure, and eventually into the British Empire. Irish music excellence thus evolved from a marker of otherness to a symbol of difference within the unity of the kingdoms under the crown. Now, we'd dearly like to know more about these harpers and about the harpers and the fiddlers and the players of the German flute who must have been about in the early 18th century. But unfortunately, the historical record yields almost nothing about their repertoire and style. Aside from some elite professionals like Matthew Dubourg and the famous Geminiani, a few aristocratic amateurs, we have no names of Irish fiddle players of the 18th century. Toby Barnard, who comprehensively searched the historical record for this type of evidence, warned that, quote, just as it is hard, indeed frequently impossible, to assess how far down the social and economic scales the materials of polite life descended, so too entertainments that were cheap, free, and spontaneous blazed up and left no trace, unquote. Lacking direct evidence of performance, we have to draw what conclusions we can from the publication of music in the 18th century, and this is where the enormous tomes collections by Alois Fleischmann, there's one of the two volumes sitting over there, becomes crucial. Fleischmann's table of contents is useful in and of itself. It shows the chronology of publication of Irish material, or material Fleischmann thought was Irish, inside and outside Ireland. And the record of Irish music remains impoverished for fresh material until well into the 18th century, and there are no publications originating in Ireland or concerned exclusively with Irish repertoire before the publication of John and William Neill's A Collection of the Most Celebrated Irish Tunes Proper for the Violin, German Flute, or Hautboy, in Dublin in 1724. They were prominent music publishers and music instrument importers based in Fishamble Street in the heart of musical Dublin. The Neill collection shows the popularity of Italian music in the capital and its influence on the harpers. It also shows the influence of the countryside on the capital, as the repertoire of harpers like Turlough Carolan, whose circuits of patronage were rural, is a strong feature of the collection. The Neills directly attribute to Carolan 4 tunes, but from later testimony, mostly from people Edward Bunting spoke to, it has been established that a further 17 of the tunes were penned by Carolan. That only a minority of his compositions are attributed to him in the volume suggests the powerful influence of his music on the performers who were the Neil sources. It's likely that in O'Carolan's day, as is the case today, the music of the tunes and their titles circulated in the oral tradition at much higher velocity than the information about them. As all contemporary players of traditional music learn, tunes composed by near contemporaries are often improperly designated as either ancient or traditional by those who learned them socially. We know from their titles and from recent research that these unattributed Carolan tunes were composed in the houses of a far-flung set of patrons throughout Connacht. So the harp tunes in Neil in 1724, and aside from the harp tunes, are the love songs. All-consuming and mortifying longing for an inaccessible lover is a prevalent theme of the songs associated with the tunes collected by the Neils. These include the very first song ever published, Sin Shees agus Suaslum. Sin Shees agus Suaslum, stretch out alongside me, Drid Anális Fesk me, Curlaba Fuin Lorraine, a Chuman a Chrí na Parcha, Tamograsha Sugak, Tashe Lufer is Ladger, Hey Ho Rirko. Pretty good. Sirenish on Mas me. Stretch out alongside me, move over and embrace me, make a bed for both of us, save me from death. Is a shid sheer and rod a Jimmy she Tamea Moholu is na dushime. These songs concern lovesick fellas, lovesick women, and heartbreak. And these are interspersed with others with more direct political connotations. And I just want to finish this characterization of what was in the Neil's volume with this quote from Dahi Spole that Fintan mentioned, right? Because I asked Dahi about this business. And he said to me that the music is functioning on a much more deeper level than politics. He said the politics that causes all this distress and mayhem, it addresses a deeper level in our being. And I asked him about this, and this is what he told me. And hello, Dahi, I hope you're tuning in as well. Well, the two words, Dahi says, I would use are love and sorrow. I remember Krishnamurti saying somewhere a thing that was just totally unexpected to me and bizarre. He said, he was almost saying that when you got down to a certain level of awareness and meditation and so on, the whole universe is like a sea of sorrow. This is a strange thing. Why doesn't he say a sea of joy? I don't know. But I think you're really playing music to communicate for and with other people. I think love and sorrow is what you're tuning into. And I think in the case of the Irish people, I think another more historically connected thing is, I would say, loss. You know, a yearning that has to do with loss. So you would look at the history of Ireland and look at all these love songs and you'd say, well, how does this correlate? Why aren't they all songs of loss of political power and loss of land and loss of this and that? And there are songs like that, but it just seems most of the songs that people sing are love songs. And I decided that the feeling of loss were really at the center of the love songs. They were talking about the feeling of all their loss when they were singing these love songs. Now, I have a few more things that I could read there. And maybe I'll read a bit more later. But I think one of the most enigmatic tunes in this collection from Neil's, the Neil's in 1724, and one of them that I think exhibits some of these ideas is a tune called the Wild Geese. And I've met Eilis Lavelle recently this year, and we both discovered that this is one of our favorite tunes. And as soon as I heard her play it, I wanted her to come and play it here tonight. So please welcome Eilis Lavelle and listen to her performance. tell us how did you encounter this tune? Where did you first?
I first heard it played by a piper, actually, by Mikey Smith, a piper from Dublin. And after that, I found it in Bunting's collection. And then I found it in the Neil, and I found it in Mulholland's collection.
Yeah.
So that version's kind of all of those versions together.
Right, yes, a mashup of at least three, yeah.
Yeah.
Are there differences, significant differences in the
no,
they're laid
very,
out?
very small, very slight differences in certain phrases. The endings of certain phrases are different in some of the collections, particularly in Mulholland's compared to Neil's and Bunting's.
Well, I know you've been pouring into the history of this volume. I mean, the amazing thing about it is, first of all, it seems to be, there's no reception history of it, I guess is the word for it, in the 18th century. It's not mentioned by the people you would think might mention it until Bunting.
Yeah.
He seems to have come across it somehow, and it's the only copy in existence. Yeah?
Yeah.
What did Bunting do with it?
He has some of the tunes from Neil's collection in his unpublished material, and he's added a left hand to it, which isn't in Neil's. In Neil's collection, there's only O'Rourke's Feast is the only one with the first part with a left hand in it, and Bunting has put what he thought was the traditional left hand that was played at the time.
And he shared it with this Mulholland fellow as well.
He must have,
And then it disappears again.
Yeah, there's no trace of it until Charles Milton Fox finds it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're lucky to have it at all, I think, and I think it's a kind of a precious item. Thanks again, Eilís.
Thank you.
Yeah. Listen, what I want to say next, and then Eilís is going to help me play a tune or two, is that there's 49 tunes in Neil. And the collection is remarkable for what is absent entirely from it. I emphasize that it's full of harp music and love songs. Its place in the context of the Neil's other publications in the 1720s is therefore significant. It appears to have been one of an ensemble of 4 publications in the 1720s, each with a distinct repertoire. Here are the titles. A Choice Collection of the Newest Airs and Minuets, 1723. A collection of the most celebrated Scotch tunes for the violin, being all different from any yet printed in London and carefully corrected by the best masters in Fishamble Street. In 1724, the same year as the celebrated Irish tunes. And the third one here, a choice collection of country dances with their proper tune in 1726. So although the harpers, including Carolyn, must have occasionally played for dancers and composed music for that purpose, it is notable that the most celebrated Irish aspect of their repertoire, according to the Neils, was the music they composed for the contemplation of their gentry patrons. Indeed, to find early evidence of the type of dance tunes which become part of the oral tradition in Ireland, it is necessary to look in the other volumes. Both the titles of the contents of these collections are significant: Scotch tunes for the violin and country dance tunes, right? And this is where you find tunes which become Irish anyway, and they don't seem to be Irish yet. So the conclusion I draw is the perception in 1720s in Dublin was that the celebrated Irish music was love songs and harp music, but the dance music wasn't particularly Irish. Even the dance music which eventually was to become Irish. So for example, in the Scots, picking up my fiddle now, guys. In the Scots collection, there's a tune called Port Royal. You might recognize. Which goes through a very long evolution and comes out in the hands of Sean Keenan, Tommy Peoples, and a few other people in the 20th century as Ginny Dang the Weaver. Okay. You can clap. But let me. The book is full of all of these titles that I've pulled out of Alois Fleischmann's rummaging through all of these country dance collections and Scottish fiddle collections, which are thin on the ground. Most of it is the Playford, the English dancing master, or just the dancing master, which is top of the pops for dance music in the late 17th and early 18th century. And tunes like these two, slip jigs, are ones that Fleischmann seemed to think that looked proto-Irish, and he included them in his volume. Although, as I say, the Neils and whoever were buying the books of music from their shop didn't consider them to be Irish yet, and the question is when they did. So here's a couple of slip jigs we know today called The Dusty Miller and The Night Before Larry Was Stretched, which is a Dublin street song as well that Frank Hart sings. So I'll have a go at those. Okay, I think we're in tune. Right. Thanks very much. End of chapter 1. Only 4 more to go. What do you think?